A forgotten song holds a power that could save or shatter the world. Elara, a young minstrel unaware of her own heritage, finds a hidden verse in an ancient ballad. As her voice lifts the words, a soft, ethereal light begins to glow around her. This is no simple melody. It is a dormant magic tied to her bloodline, a force where every note is a spell and every chord a choice. Her journey will decide whether a lost legacy of harmony is restored or a long dormant darkness is awakened forever. By the end of this story, you will understand the profound link between memory and magic, and how a single song can alter the fate of an entire world. Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? What would you risk to uncover a secret history written in song? The stone beneath her fingers was cold, yet the melody from her lute seemed to warm it. Elara had returned to the ruins, not by chance, but with a deliberate need to understand the strange light her voice had summoned. She played the hidden verse once more, her fingers finding the chords as if guided by an unseen hand. This time, however, the music did more than glow. It resonated, a low hum that vibrated through the ancient floor, causing a section of moss-covered wall to shimmer and fade, revealing a narrow alcove hidden for centuries. Inside rested a silver lyre, its frame etched with runes that pulsed with a soft, captured light. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. The moment her skin touched the cool metal, the ruins vanished. A vision engulfed her. She was no longer Elara, but a woman named Lurel, her own silver hair streaming as she stood against a formless, whispering shadow. Lurel's hands flew across the strings of this very lyre, and a chord of pure, solid light erupted from it, a shield of sound that forced the darkness back. The vision ended as abruptly as it began, but it left a gift, a burning echo of that protective chord seared into Elara's mind. She could feel the shape of the spell, a sequence of notes waiting to be sung. But the vision also left a warning, a presence, cold and ancient, now stirred in the deep places of the ruin. It had felt the magic's awakening, her heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to abandon this place and its secrets. Yet part of her wanted to stay, to search the vision for more clues, to understand Lurel's fate. The choice was a weight in her hands, a balance between knowledge and survival. With a final, fearful glance into the deepening shadows, she made her decision. She carefully lifted the lyre, its weight both a burden and a promise, and turned to flee. Survival came first. Discovery would have to wait, slipping out of the crumbling archway and into the relative safety of the forest. She clutched the artifact close. This was no mere instrument. It was a key, and she had just turned it in a lock others wished to keep sealed forever. The very air felt different, charged with a watchful hostility. As the trees enveloped her, a sudden, piercing cold settled between her shoulder blades, the unmistakable sensation of a predatory gaze fixed upon her back. Her flight had been seen. The cold at her back sharpened into a voice. "Do not run." The command was quiet, but it froze her in place more effectively than any shout. She turned slowly, her hand tightening on the lyre. A man stood beneath the boughs of an ancient oak, his cloak the color of twilight. He was not young, but his eyes held a weary knowledge that made Elara feel like a child. He did not look at her face, but at the instrument in her arms. "You have awakened something that should have slept," he said, his voice low and urgent. "My name is Kalin. I am a keeper of the old ways, and you, child, are holding a key to a lock that must not be opened carelessly." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "That is Lurel's lyre. Your very blood calls to its power, but every note you play risks unraveling the enchantments that hold the silence at bay." The name struck a chord of primal fear deep within her. The silence, he explained, was not a void, but a living hunger. It sought to consume all magical song, to erase the melodies of creation and memory from the world, leaving nothing but an eternal, soundless hush. "Your awakening has drawn its attention," Kalin warned. "You are the last of Lurel's line, and now you are a beacon in the growing dark." He offered a hand, not in friendship, but in necessity. "I can guide you. I know the paths to safety, to places where you might learn to control what you have unleashed." But his eyes were guarded, his story holding back as much as it revealed. Elara's mind warred with itself. This stranger knew her name, her legacy, the very danger she had felt stirring in the ruins. Yet trust was a luxury she could not afford. Could she believe his tale of ancient malices and fragile enchantments? Or was he simply another hunter, seeking the lyre for himself? Her own desire to understand her heritage, to master the magic humming in her veins, was a powerful lure. But the memory of that formless shadow in her vision was stronger. The risk of facing that alone was far greater than the uncertainty of his guidance. "I will travel with you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "but only until I understand what this is." Kalin gave a slow, grave nod, as if he had expected no other answer. "At dawn, then, we make for the Hall of Echoes. There, the echoes of the great bards still linger. If any place holds the knowledge you seek, it is there." The stakes were no longer just about her own survival. It was about preserving every story ever sung, every spell ever woven into melody. The history of Middle-earth itself was now the prize in a silent, desperate war. As the first light of morning touched the horizon, they began their journey east, leaving the relative safety of the woods for a path lined with the ghosts of forgotten songs. The mountain wind was a blade of ice, but the lyre on Elara's back radiated a faint, persistent warmth. Each step through the treacherous, scree-strewn passes felt like a test of will, the path itself seeming to resist their progress. Kalin moved with a grim silence, his eyes constantly scanning the jagged peaks. When they finally reached the Hall of Echoes, it was not a grand palace, but a cavernous chamber hidden within the heart of the mountain, its walls smooth and rounded, as if carved by a river of sound long since vanished. The air was thick, not with dust, but with a profound and waiting quiet. Kalin gestured for her to play. With trembling fingers, Elara took the lyre and plucked a single, clear note. The chamber answered. That one note multiplied, rippling outwards until the very air shimmered. Spectral forms began to coalesce from the stone, translucent figures of bards from ages past, each holding their own ethereal instruments. They did not speak, but played, and as their forgotten melodies washed over her, Elara understood. She was not just hearing music, she was receiving spells. A lullaby woven from starlight taught her a charm of concealment. A thunderous war hymn revealed the shape of a shield made from solid sound. Each new melody she absorbed sank into her bones, strengthening her connection to the magic. She could feel the power rising within her, a vibrant, singing river where before there had been only a trickle. But with every new chord she mastered, a counter-reaction trembled through the hall. Deep, percussive shudders echoed from the depths, and a sinister, whispering static began to bleed into the edges of the beautiful music. The barriers were weakening. The silence was stirring in its prison, drawn by the very power she was awakening. Elara faced a terrible choice. She could push forward, learning every spell the echoes offered, and risk unleashing that ancient hunger upon the world with a strength she could not hope to match. Or she could retreat, leaving this well of knowledge untapped. Her ambition warred with a cold, dawning fear. She looked at the spectral bards, their faces etched with the joy of creation, and made her decision. She would learn only the protective spells, the shields and wards and charms of hiding. She turned away from the aggressive, powerful battle magics, focusing instead on the gentle, defensive harmonies. It was a choice of wisdom over raw strength, a prioritization of safety for the many over power for herself. This careful selection seemed to calm the hall's tremors slightly, but the damage was done. Their presence was no longer a secret. From the dark crevices and shadowed tunnels leading into the hall, slender, wraith-like forms began to emerge. They were creatures of pure absence, their passage sucking the sound from the air, leaving a vacuum of dread in their wake. The minions of the silence had found them. Kalin's hand was on her arm, his voice tight with urgency. "We must go. Now." He pointed toward a narrow archway on the far side of the chamber, one that glimmered with a faint, golden light. "Our only hope lies to the east, in the hidden city of Lorian. If any allies remain in this fading world, we will find them there." The golden light of Lorian did not banish the cold dread from the ruins, but it did offer a fragile sanctuary. Here, under the silver-barked malorn trees, the air itself seemed to hum with ancient, untroubled melodies. Yet even this haven was not untouched. They found a young elf guard, his arm withered and gray from a glancing blow by one of the silence's wraiths, his life essence fading into a soundless void. Without a second thought, Elara knelt, her hands finding the lyre. She did not know the spell she played. She simply let her compassion guide her fingers, weaving a melody of remembrance and growth, of sunlight on leaves and the first spring rain. As she sang, a soft green-gold light flowed from the strings, enveloping the elf's wounded arm. The gray corruption receded, replaced by healthy flesh, and the elf drew a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes clearing. A profound hush fell over the clearing, and then a presence was among them. Lady Galadriel stood watching, her gaze as deep and knowing as the night sky. "The song you sang was one known only to the line of Lurel," she said, her voice a gentle chime. "You have her gift, and now you bear her burden. Your healing has mended one wound, but its echo has been heard in the void. You have become a beacon." From a fold in her robe, Galadriel produced a small, crystalline vial, filled with a liquid that seemed to hold captured starlight. "This is the light of Rivendell," she explained. "It can purify melodies that have been twisted by the silence, turning dissonance back into harmony, but it is a tool, not a weapon. Its power depends entirely on the purity of the heart that wields it." She then offered Elara a choice: stay in Lorien, learn to control the river of magic within you, I can teach you to weave light into your music, to build shields that even the silence cannot easily breach. To leave now is to carry a torch into a storm with no knowledge of how to keep it lit. The decision tore at Elara. Every day spent in training was another day the silence grew stronger. Another day it corrupted more of the world's song. Yet the memory of the Hall of Echoes was seared into her mind. She had felt the terrifying scale of the power she was meddling with. To face that without mastery was not bravery, it was folly. She thought of the wounded elf, and of the twisted, dissonant notes she could now hear at the very edges of the forest's song, a creeping blight that harmed the trees and poisoned the streams. Her raw power was not enough. She needed precision. "I will stay," Elara said, her voice firm with a new resolve. "I will learn." Under Galadriel's patient guidance, Elara's understanding of her magic transformed. She learned that a song was not just a sequence of notes, but a tapestry. She practiced weaving threads of pure light into her melodies, creating harmonies that could reinforce the natural world against the silence's corruption. She learned to listen, to hear the subtle discord in a bird's call, or the rustle of leaves that signaled the enemy's approach. It was no longer about unleashing power. It was about becoming a true guardian of song, a weaver of reality itself. This hard-won control would be tested sooner than any of them hoped, for the path to their next goal led through the treacherous, echo-choked passes of the misty mountains, a place where every sound could betray them, and every shadow hid a listener. The thin air of the high passes bit at Elara's lungs. Each step was a battle against the slope and the oppressive quiet that had fallen over the mountains. The natural echoes of the peaks were gone, replaced by a deadened stillness that felt unnatural and wrong. Kalin pointed to a fracture in the cliff face above, his expression grim. "The silence has been here. It poisons the very stone." As if his words were a trigger, a deep groan rumbled through the mountain. A web of cracks shot across the rock high above, and with a roar that was horrifyingly muted, the cliff face began to slide. Tons of stone and debris tumbled downward, directly toward a narrow path where a small group of dwarven travelers stood frozen in terror. There was no time for thought, only instinct. Elara's hands flew to her lyre. She did not play a song of raw power to shatter the falling boulders. Instead, she recalled Galadriel's teachings, weaving a melody of binding and calm. Her voice rose, pure and strong, weaving threads of harmonic light through the chaotic air. The song did not stop the rockslide, but it gentled it. The tumbling boulders seemed to lose their violent intent, sliding and settling with a strange, almost deliberate grace, piling into a protective berm that shielded the dwarves rather than crushing them. As the last pebble settled, a profound silence returned, broken only by Elara's ragged breathing. She slumped against a rock, her body trembling with a deep, magical exhaustion. The effort of reshaping such raw, chaotic force had drained her completely. The lead dwarf, a sturdy elder named Borin, with a braided beard streaked with gray, approached them, his initial suspicion replaced with awed respect. He placed a heavy, calloused hand on her shoulder. "The stone sings of your deed, song weaver. You have the touch of the true harmony." Over a shared fire in a sheltered cave, Borin shared a legend of his people. He spoke of the foundation chord, a single, perfect note struck by the world smiths at the dawn of time. It is said this chord still resonates deep within the earth, in places where the stone remembers its making. But the melody is fractured, its power faded. Your enemy seeks to shatter it completely. If it breaks, all harmony will unravel, and the world itself will become unstable, just as you witnessed today. His people believed a record of this primal music, a notation of the foundation chord, was kept in the deepest archives of Khazad-dûm, the ancient dwarf kingdom, now dark and silent. Elara listened, but her own doubts shouted louder than Borin's tale. The cost of containing the Rockslide had been immense. Her fingers still felt numb, and a core deep weariness made the thought of a deeper, darker journey feel impossible. If a mere Rockslide demanded so much of her, what hope did she have against the source of the silence itself? Kalin watched her, his silence a question. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for the fate he saw resting on her weary shoulders. The choice was hers. To rest and recover was the wise path, but it was a luxury the world could not afford. The mountains had groaned in pain, a direct result of the enemy's growing strength. With a resolve that felt borrowed from some deep well within, Elara pushed herself to her feet. Her legs felt unsteady, but her voice was clear. We go to Khazad-dûm. Borin and his kin, indebted by their lives, agreed to guide them to a hidden gate, a path known only to a few. As they prepared to descend into the absolute dark, the world above seemed to hold its breath. They were leaving the fragile safety of the open air for a realm of stone and memory, where every shadow was a listener and every echo a potential trap. The air inside Khazad-dûm was a physical weight, thick with the dust of ages and a silence so profound it felt like a held breath. Borin led them by the faint glow of a single dwarven lantern, its light barely piercing the oppressive dark. The ruins felt less like a dead city and more like a tomb for sound itself. Driven by a desperate hope, Elara unslung her lyre. She did not play a spell, but a simple, probing melody of remembrance, a tune meant to honor the memory of the mountain's lost songs. The moment the first note left the strings, it was caught and amplified. All around them, massive, dormant crystals embedded in the pillars and ceilings began to pulse with a soft, internal light, drinking in the music and shining it back 100-fold. The great hall was suddenly bathed in a shifting, ethereal radiance, revealing walls covered in intricate runic inscriptions that glowed with captured starlight. As the light spread, it scoured the shadows, and the wraith-like creatures that had been slithering toward them recoiled with silent shrieks, their forms dissolving in the purity of the illuminated melody. But their victory was short-lived. A deep grinding sound echoed through the hall as a colossal statue of a dwarf lord, carved from a single block of obsidian, shuddered to life. It did not raise a weapon, but instead lifted stone hands, and from them erupted a wave of pure, aggressive discord. The sound was a physical assault, a chaotic vibration that sought to shatter Elara's concentration and break her spirit. This was the test. The guardian was not attacking her body, but her worthiness. Fear surged within her, the old fear of inadequacy, shouting that her power was a fluke, that she was an imposter wearing a hero's mantle. The easy path would be to answer force with force, to unleash the battle magics she had learned in the Hall of Echoes and try to overpower the dissonance. But she remembered the cost of such power and the lesson of the Rockslide. True strength was not in domination, but in harmony. Closing her eyes against the terrifying figure, she let her fingers find a different chord. She began to sing, not a song of war, but a melody of unity. She wove together the sturdy rhythm of the stone, the patient growth of the deep-rooted fungi, and the enduring hope of starlight that finds its way into even the deepest dark. Her song did not fight the guardian's discord. It embraced it, weaving threads of harmony around the chaotic notes and slowly, painstakingly, turning the cacophony back into a coherent, beautiful whole. The statue's onslaught ceased. It lowered its hands, and with a final, resonant chime, a hidden compartment opened in its chest. Within, resting on a cushion of velvet that had not decayed, was a stone tablet. Etched into its surface was a single, impossibly complex musical phrase. This was the lost chord, a fragment of the world's foundational music. As her fingers traced the notation, the knowledge flowed directly into her, a stabilizing power that settled deep in her bones. She felt more complete, more anchored to the world than ever before, but the acquisition of such power sent a shockwave through the unseen realms. As they finally emerged from the mountain's depths, blinking in the wan daylight, a new sound reached them. It was a melody, haunting and beautiful, but twisted by a profound and ancient sorrow. It carried on the wind, a deliberate answer to the harmony she had just restored. Kalin's face paled. "Morwen," he whispered, the name itself a curse. "The fallen bard has come for you herself." The distant song was not a threat, but a summons. The battle for the soul of music had just become deeply, terrifyingly personal. Morwen's song was a blade wrapped in velvet. It slid through the narrow mountain pass, twisting the very air into knots of confusion. One moment, Elara stood shoulder to shoulder with Kalin and Borin. The next, the world dissolved into a cacophony of shrieking dissonance. Wraiths, drawn by the corrupted melody, swarmed from the rocks, their forms blurring the edges of reality. Elara's mind reeled, the beautiful, sorrowful tune threatening to unravel her own concentration. Instinct took over. Her fingers found the lyre, and she poured the lost chord into the chaos. It was not an attack, but an anchor. A sphere of pure, resonant harmony bloomed around her and her companions, a sanctuary of ordered sound that the wraiths could not penetrate. They clawed at its edges, their silent screams swallowed by the shield's unwavering song. When the assault faded, the cost was clear. Kalin slumped against the stone, a deep, unnatural chill seeping from a gash on his arm, where a wraith's touch had bypassed the shield in its initial formation. As Elara rushed to his side, a fragment of Morwen's melody echoed in her mind, and with it came a vision, unbidden and raw. She saw Morwen not as a vessel of shadow, but as a young woman laughing with Lurel, their fingers dancing across twin lyres under a canopy of stars. The vision shifted to a battlefield, to Lurel's final, sacrificial chord, and to Morwen, left alone, her grief a festering wound the silence had eagerly filled. She wasn't just an enemy, she was a sister in art, broken by the very loss she was now trying to inflict upon the world. This understanding settled on Elara like a physical weight. The easy path, the necessary one by any strategic measure, was to destroy Morwen before she could strike again. But the memory of Galadriel's teachings, of the light of Rivendell meant to purify, burned within her. To defeat the silence, she could not simply mirror its violence. She had to offer an alternative. Ignoring Borin's warning shout, Elara stepped beyond her protective shield, her lyre held not as a weapon, but as an offering. She did not sing a spell of binding or a charm of sleep. Instead, she wove a song of memory, a gentle melody filled with the specific joy of shared creation, the very joy she had seen in her vision. She sang of Lurel's smile, of the scent of rain on malorn leaves, of the quiet comfort of a friendship that once was. For a single, heart-stopping moment, the predatory light in Morwen's eyes flickered. A tremor passed through the corrupted song surrounding her, and a note of pure, agonizing clarity broke through the dissonance. It was a glimpse of the woman she had been, a fleeting crack in the prison of her grief. Then it was gone. The sorrow twisted back into fury, and Morwen vanished into the mist, her retreat as silent and swift as her attack. She had not been redeemed, but she had been reached. The encounter proved the silence's greatest strength was its prey. It fed on sorrow, on loneliness, on the very vulnerabilities Elara carried within her own heart. Her past losses were no longer just personal history. They were a potential gateway for the enemy. As she tended to Kalin, using a gentle melody to slowly warm his frozen flesh, Elara's resolve hardened. This was no longer a battle against a faceless hunger. It was a fight for the souls of those the hunger had already claimed. When Kalin was stable enough to travel, his voice was weak but certain. Our path leads to the sea, to the Grey Havens. Certain the shipwright has guarded the shores of Middle-earth since the First Age. If any living being knows the final measures of the spell that can mend the foundation chord, it is he. With the personal stakes irrevocably deepened, they turned their faces west, toward the salt-tanged air and the wisdom of the oldest guardian of all. The salt-scoured wood of the Grey Havens felt ancient beneath Elara's touch, a stark contrast to the living stone of Khazad-dûm. Certain the shipwright stood before her, his eyes holding the weight of countless tides. Without a word of greeting, Elara lifted the lyre and played the lost chord. The complex phrase resonated through the quiet harbor, and for the first time, the ancient mariner's stern expression softened with something like reverence. He led her to a chamber carved into the cliffside, where the air smelled of brine and old parchment. From a chest of fragrant cedar, he produced a scroll, so old it seemed woven from moonlight and memory. "This is the song of binding," Certain said, his voice a low rumble like distant waves. "It is the only melody strong enough to weave the foundation chord back into the fabric of the world, to seal the silence away for another age. But its price is the singer's essence. You must pour your own memories, your very identity, into the music. To save all song, you must be willing to forget every song you have ever known." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Elara's hands trembled as she unrolled the scroll. The notation was not written in ink, but in shifting patterns of light, a river of potential that flowed directly into her mind. The song was beautiful, a heartbreakingly perfect counter-melody to the silence's hunger. But as she absorbed it, she felt a terrifying hollowing out, a preview of the sacrifice. To sing this would be to forget Kalin's steadfast guidance, Boren's gruff gratitude, the warmth of Lorian's light, even the face of her own mother. She would become a vessel of pure purpose, empty of the very experiences that had shaped her into the person capable of this act. Hope and dread warred within her, a dissonant chord that threatened to shatter her resolve. How could she save a world of stories if she had to erase her own? She could not accept this fate, not yet. There must be another way, she insisted, her voice tight with a desperate determination. The magic of song is about connection, not annihilation. I will learn the song of binding, but I will find a way to sing it without this price. I will not become a ghost in the world I save. Círdan watched her, his ancient gaze neither approving nor disapproving, but deeply sad. The scroll offers no alternatives, child. It was written in a time of absolute sacrifice. Yet he did not stop her as she began to practice, her fingers tracing the luminous patterns, her voice tentatively shaping the world-altering phrases. She searched for a loophole, a different harmonic resonance, anything that might anchor her memories while still channeling the spell's required power. Outside the harbor, the sea itself began to sicken. A creeping gray stillness spread across the water, silencing the gulls and stilling the waves. The silence's corruption was no longer a distant threat. It was at their doorstep, seeking to trap them, to isolate this last bastion of hope and swallow it whole. The air grew heavy and cold, the vibrant blues of the sea leaching away into a morbid, soundless gray. Time had run out. Círdan pointed to a sleek, gray-sailed ship, ready at the end of the longest quay. The final measures of this song can only be sung where the world's music first began to fray. He urged, "You must sail for the Isle of Balar. There, under the light of the full moon, the veil between melodies is thinnest. It is the only place where your song and your choice can have their full effect. Go now. The fate of every story now rests on a single, impossible performance, and the memory of a girl who may have to forget she was ever brave enough to try." The stone circle on the Isle of Balar hummed with a low, pervasive energy. Elara stood at its center, the ancient scroll of the song of binding glowing before her. With every phrase she practiced, the air around the monoliths shimmered, thickening with tangible magic. But each perfect note was a siphon, drawing not just on her energy, but on the vivid recollections that made her who she was. She felt the memory of her mother's lullaby grow faint, the warmth of Lorian's light dim in her mind. The spell demanded everything. During these rehearsals, the silence's grip on the island would momentarily falter. In those fleeting instants, she did not see victory, but the cost. Through the temporary rifts, she saw them, the trapped spirits of bards and storytellers consumed by the void. Their silent, agonized faces were a gallery of lost music, their stories frozen in an eternal, soundless scream. This horrific sight steeled her resolve, even as it carved a deeper well of sorrow within her. How could she let such a fate claim every song yet unsung? Yet the sheer scale of the sacrifice terrified her. Her body trembled with a deep, magical exhaustion after each session. Doubt was a cold whisper in her ear, asking if she was strong enough to finish the spell without her own spirit being extinguished in the process. She was one person, and the scroll demanded one person's entire history. Staring at her reflection in a rain-filled stone basin, she found her answer. She was not just one person. She was a vessel for all the hope she had encountered. The idea came to her not as a shout, but as a quiet harmony. She would not channel only her own memories. She would weave a tapestry from the collective hope of those she had met. She would use Kalin's steadfast loyalty, Boren's enduring strength, the healed elf's gratitude, and even the fractured love she had glimpsed in Morwen. She would transform the song of binding from a solo of sacrifice into a chorus of shared will. As the full moon broke through the clouds, its cold light revealed the enemy's answer. The sky above the island tore open, not with storm clouds, but with a vortex of absolute anti-music, a swirling void that devoured the very concept of melody. And at its heart stood Morwen, her form a nexus of the silence's power, her lyre poised to strike the chord that would extinguish all bardic magic forever. The culmination of her journey was a maelstrom of silent hunger, and Elara stepped forward to meet it, her own lyre feeling suddenly light in her hands. The vortex of anti-music tore at the edges of reality, a silent scream that sought to unravel the world. Elara lifted her lyre, her voice a single, defiant thread of melody against the overwhelming void. She did not sing the song of binding as a solo of sacrifice. Instead, she wove a chorus of shared hope, stitching the lost chord into its fabric and infusing every phrase with the purifying light of Rivendell from Galadriel's vial. As the magic demanded its price, she did not resist. She offered her memories freely, a willing sacrifice. She poured the warmth of her mother's lullaby into the spell, the steady reassurance of Kalin's guidance, the fierce joy of her first spell in the ruins. Each cherished moment became a luminous thread in the net of light she was weaving, a net that flew from her and ensnared the swirling silence. The corruption shrieked in dissonant fury as the pure melody began to dissolve its form. In the heart of the chaos, Morwen faltered. The song washing over her was not one of judgment, but of profound understanding. It held the echo of her own laughter with Lurel, the shared joy she had thought forever lost. The predatory focus in her eyes shattered, replaced by a clarity of agonizing grief. She looked at Elara, not as an enemy, but as a sister completing a task she herself had failed. With a final, sorrowful smile, Morwen lifted her own corrupted lyre. She did not play a note of the silence, but a single, pure chord of redemption, a fragment of the music she and Lurel had once created together. She joined her melody to Elara's, her own essence, flowing into the binding spell. Her form began to fade, but her music strengthened the net of light 1,000-fold, reinforcing it with the power of a love finally remembered. It was the final key, the combined power of two lines, one pure and one redeemed, surged through the vortex. With a sound like a great, deep breath being drawn, the silence collapsed in on itself, sealed away by a harmony it could not comprehend. The spell snapped shut. The oppressive quiet vanished, replaced by the natural sounds of a waking world, the crash of waves and the cry of gulls, feeling like a miracle. Elara collapsed, the lyre falling silent beside her. She was hollowed out, a vessel drained to its dregs. The faces of her friends were there, but their names were gone. The memory of her mother's song was a blank space where a warm light used to be. She had given everything, yet as the first rays of dawn touched the standing stones, a new melody drifted on the wind. It was a simple tune, one she did not recognize, yet it felt intimately familiar. It carried the warmth of a mother's love and the steadfastness of a loyal friend. Across Middle-earth, in taverns and royal halls, in forest clearings and mountain homes, new songs were being sung. They were songs of a minstrel who saved the world with a chorus of memory, songs that held within them the very essence of what she had sacrificed. Her personal history was lost to her, but it was not gone. It had been transformed, woven into the collective memory of the world, a legacy written not in stone, but but in the enduring magic of every story yet to be told. The silver lyre felt different in her hands now, lighter and more familiar. Elara sat in the dappled light of a Lorian glade, her fingers tracing the cool metal of the instrument she had once carried as a burden. The clearest memory was the first, the cold stone of the ruins and the strange light her voice had summoned. The rest were like pages from a book written in fading ink. She knew Kalin was her steadfast friend, his presence a quiet comfort as he sat nearby, but the memory of their first tense meeting was gone. She knew she had saved the dwarves in the mountains, but the visceral fear of the falling rocks was a ghost of a feeling. Galadriel's guidance was helping to mend the tears in her mind, yet some threads of her past were lost for good. The warmth of her mother's lullaby was a beautiful story told to her by others, no longer a melody she could hear in her own heart. This emptiness was the price, and some days its weight was profound. Yet on other days, a strange and profound peace would settle over her. A new minstrel would arrive in the city, singing a ballad of the minstrel of the lost Chord, a tale of a great darkness sealed by a chorus of hope. As Elara listened to the story of her own deeds, she did not feel the sorrow of forgetting, but the quiet joy of knowing that her personal loss had become the world's collective gain. The magic of the bards was safe. The foundational music of the world hummed steadily once more. Every new song composed, every spell woven into melody by future generations, was a living testament to her choice. She had not erased herself. She had rewritten her story into the very fabric of Middle-earth's memory. She lifted the lyre and played, not a spell of power or a charm of protection, but a simple, improvised tune. It was a song of morning dew and new leaves, a melody that asked for nothing and gave everything. This was her role now. She was a guardian, a keeper of the harmony she had fought so hard to restore. Her strength was no longer a roaring river of raw power, but the deep, still well of compassion and unity that had ultimately triumphed. The horizon was no longer a place of fear, but a promise. There were still verses to be written, stories to be discovered, and songs to be sung. And with the silver lyre in her hands and a quiet hope in her heart, Elara was ready to sing them. The familiar path to her homeland felt different beneath her feet. Elara walked it not as a frightened girl fleeing a mystery, but as a guardian returning with a hard-won gift. Her strength had returned, not as the roaring river of her first awakening, but as a deep, steady well of purpose. She sought out the young minstrels, the ones with bright eyes and untested voices, and she began to teach. She showed them how to weave threads of light into a simple lullaby, how a song of growth could encourage a blighted crop, how a melody of calm could soothe a frightened animal. This was not the volatile power of old, but a purified magic, a partnership with the world's own song. Her students flourished, their music becoming a vibrant thread in the community's daily life. They began to meticulously document the spells, creating illuminated songbooks that served as both artistic treasures and practical guides. The very air in the villages seemed to hum with a renewed vitality, a stronger, more resilient harmony. But this new song was not welcomed by all. A faction of elder minstrels, led by a stern woman named Anya, watched the proceedings with deep suspicion. They remembered the old tales of the silence, of how bardic magic had once invited catastrophe. They saw not preservation, but perilous innovation. Anya confronted Elara after a lesson, her arms crossed tightly. "You teach them to play with fire," she argued, her voice low and tense. "This knowledge was kept safe because it was rare. By giving it to every child with a tune in their heart, you risk another fall." The unity of the community, so recently fortified, now trembled on the edge of a schism. Elara felt the old impulse to argue, to prove her righteousness with the power thrumming in her veins. But she remembered the cost of division, the way the silence fed on isolation. Instead, she invited Anya to a quiet grove at twilight. She did not bring her lyre. She simply sat and asked the elder to share her fears. Elara listened, truly listened, to the stories of loss and caution passed down through Anya's lineage. Then she spoke not of power, but of guardianship. She explained how the purified magic was a shield, how a community united in song could create a harmony that repelled darkness rather than attracting it. She did not force the issue, she demonstrated it, gently guiding Anya's own experienced hands to form a simple cord of protection, a feeling the elder had never known was possible. Anya's resistance did not melt away in an instant, but it began to soften, worn down by patience and proof. The fragile piece was holding, but it required constant, careful tending. Just as this new balance was being forged, a traveler from the distant north brought a tantalizing whisper. He spoke of an ancient score, a composition of such complexity it was said to be unplayable, hidden for ages within the legendary libraries of Rivendell. The rumor suggested it held not a spell, but a blueprint, a key to understanding the very architecture of magical music itself. The invitation to Rivendell arrived on a leaf of silver-barked birch, its script flowing like a quiet melody. The halls of Imladris felt like a library built inside a living forest, with waterfalls providing a constant, harmonic backdrop to the shelves of ancient knowledge. Here, guided by the patient lore masters Elara and Kalin, found scrolls that transformed their understanding of magic entirely. These texts described a deep, symbiotic bond between Bardic song and the natural world. They spoke of melodies that could coax stubborn seeds from frozen earth, or harmonies that could gentle a raging storm into a nurturing rain. This was not magic of command, but of conversation, a way of asking the world to remember its own perfect balance. The potential was staggering. With these spells, they could truly heal the land still gray and silent from the old darkness, restoring vibrancy to places that had forgotten how to sing. Elara's initial excitement was a bright, eager flame. She wanted to learn every song, to rush out and mend every scar on the map. But Kalin's steadying presence and the sober warnings within the scrolls themselves gave her pause. The text spoke of bards who, in their arrogance, had used growth songs to force harvests until the soil was dust, or had stilled storms so completely that droughts followed. The power to harmonize with nature was also the power to disrupt its essential rhythms. The choice was clear. She could either hoard this knowledge out of fear or wield it recklessly out of pride. Neither path led to true healing. Instead, she chose a third way, one of patient, systematic study. She began to create a curriculum, a structured path of learning that wove ethics and restraint into the very fabric of each spell. A student would not simply learn a song to call rain. They would first learn to understand the land's true need for it. Mastering this symbiotic magic promised a future safe from the ecological collapses that had followed past conflicts. It was a chance to build a world resilient against such decay, yet the cost of failure was equally immense. A single misguided melody could unravel the delicate balances of an entire region, creating new wastelands in the name of salvation. The responsibility was a heavy weight, and Elara often practiced her new songs in the secluded gardens, ensuring each note was a request, never a demand. Her careful research, however, was abruptly interrupted. A breathless messenger from the west brought troubling news. From the gentle hills of the Shire, where songs were meant for celebration and simple comfort, came word of strange discord, melodies twisting in the air and causing unseasonable frosts to bloom on summer flowers. The gentle hills of the Shire felt unnervingly still. Elara arrived to find a land caught in a strange, listless slumber. Wildflowers drooped, their colors muted, and the usually bustling market square was quiet, its inhabitants moving with a slow, confused lethargy. The air itself carried the faint, sickly sweet scent of corrupted music. Cheerful hobbit, drinking songs and lively dance tunes, the very heart of their culture, had been subtly twisted. Their simple melodies now carried a dissonant undertone, a spell of confusion that sapped will and clouded simple thoughts. The residual corruption of the silence, like a poisonous weed, had taken root in the most innocent of soils. If this blight could flourish here, in a place of such inherent joy, then no community was truly safe. The fragile peace she had sacrificed so much for was already beginning to fray at the edges. Her first challenge was not the magic itself, but the people. The hobbits were a pragmatic folk, suspicious of grand tales and magical explanations. To speak of ancient hungers and sonic corruption would only frighten them, breeding the very distrust the silence fed upon. So, she put her lyre away and sat with the local musicians in the Green Dragon Inn, listening patiently as they lamented how their songs just did not feel right anymore. She did not lecture them. Instead, she used a simple, homely analogy. Think of a good seed, she explained. You plant it in good soil, with sun and water, and it grows into a fine tomato. But if a blight gets into the soil, that same seed produces a sickly, bitter fruit. Your songs are the seeds. A shadow has fallen on the soil of the Shire, and we must work together to restore its health. She led not by command, but by gentle demonstration. She asked them to play their most beloved tune, and as the weary, discordant notes filled the air, she did not play over them. She wove a counter-melody, a simple, clear line of purifying harmony that spiraled around their music like morning mist, gently absorbing the dissonance and untwisting the knotted magic. As she played, the heaviness in the room began to lift. One by one, the hobbit musicians found their old rhythm, their notes growing clearer and more robust, until the familiar tune rang out with its original, infectious joy. The effect was immediate and visible. A hobbit who had been staring blankly at his half-finished wood carving suddenly picked up his tools with renewed vigor. Laughter, genuine and unforced, bubbled up from a corner table. The very light in the room seemed to brighten. The successful purification was a revelation. The hobbits developed a profound, new appreciation for the power they had always wielded unconsciously. They began to practice their tunes with a fresh sense of responsibility and wonder, understanding that their music was not just entertainment, but an active force that nurtured their home. In gratitude, The elders shared an old, half-remembered tale. They spoke of a singing stone deep in the heart of the old forest, a place most hobbits wisely avoided. They said the stone hummed with a melody older than the Shire itself, a tune that some claimed could teach the very trees to dance. It was not a place of darkness, but of a different, wilder magic altogether. The old forest was a realm of patient, watchful silence. Sunlight struggled through a dense canopy of ancient oaks, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Following the hobbits' directions, Elara and Kalin moved carefully, their footsteps muffled by centuries of fallen leaves. The further they went, the more the ambient sounds of the world faded away, until only their own breathing remained. Then a sound began to grow, not from a single point, but from the forest itself. It was a low, resonant hum, a vibration that seemed to rise from the roots of the trees and pulse through the very stone beneath their feet. It was the singing stone. They found it standing in a small, sun-dappled clearing, a solitary menhir of dark, weathered rock. It did not simply produce a song, it was a song, its surface thrumming with a melody so old it felt like the heartbeat of the world. As Elara approached, the silver lyre on her back began to vibrate in sympathy. She lifted it, her fingers finding the strings almost of their own accord, and answered the stone's call with a tentative chord of her own. The moment her music touched the menhir's resonance, her mind was flooded not with a vision, but with a pure, overwhelming sensation of memory. This was not the history of kings or battles, but the deep time of the earth itself. She felt the patient pressure that turned sediment to stone, the slow, stretching growth of the first forests, the ancient rhythm of the seas. The melodies she received were not spells in the way she understood them. They were foundational patterns, the original harmonies from which all other bardic magic was merely an echo. This was a power that predated the elves, a music woven into the substance of Arda at its making. To interact with it was not to cast a spell upon the world, but to remind the world of what it already was. The sheer scale of this knowledge was a crushing weight. How could her mortal mind, with all its fleeting concerns and fragile memories, possibly hold the echo of a mountain's birth or a continent's slow drift? It was like trying to contain an ocean in a cup. She felt her own identity threatening to dissolve into the vast, timeless chorus. For a terrifying moment, she understood how one could be lost forever in such grandeur, becoming just another silent note in the planet's endless song. She pulled back, gasping, her connection to the lyre severing. The forest rushed back into focus, the profound hum of the stone now feeling ominously immense. Kalin steadied her, his grip firm, his presence a tether to the here and now. In that moment of overwhelming awe and fear, her purpose crystallized. This was not a power to be wielded, commanded, or even fully understood. It was a sacred trust. She looked from the ancient stone to the vibrant, vulnerable life of the Shire, just beyond the forest's edge, and she made a vow, not aloud, but in the quiet of her heart. She would use this wisdom only as a steward, for healing and preservation, never for dominion. Her role was not to be a master of this magic, but its custodian. This revelation came with a terrifying new clarity about the stakes. Bardic magic was not just a tool for heroes or a weapon against darkness. It was a fundamental thread in the tapestry of reality. Any future threat to this art, any attempt to sever this connection, would not just silence the bards, it could unravel the planet's memory, causing the very laws of nature to falter and decay. The consequences of failure were no longer the end of a story, but the unmaking of the world itself. Emerging from the old forest, Elara carried a new and solemn determination. The isolated teachings in Lorian and the scattered minstrels in the villages were no longer enough. The world needed more than a lone guardian. It needed a lineage. Empowered by her connection to the earth's oldest songs, she set her sights on a grander goal, the establishment of a formal college for bards, an institution dedicated to preserving this sacred stewardship for all the ages to come. The secluded valley was a natural amphitheater, its steep sides cradling the sound of falling water and birdsong. Here, with stone gifted by the dwarves and living wood shaped by the elves, the College of Harmonies began to rise. Its halls were designed not for grandeur, but for resonance, with curved walls that carried a whisper from one end to the other. Elara's vision was simple: to create a sanctuary where the art of bardic magic could be taught not as a secret power, but as a shared responsibility. Yet turning that vision into stone and timber required more than goodwill. It demanded resources they did not have. Negotiations were a delicate dance. She met with dwarven lords in their mountain halls and elven councils under the Malorn trees, each faction offering aid with its own expectations. The dwarves saw a potential fortress, a new outpost of order. The elves desired a library of pure lore, isolated from the wider world. Elara had to carefully navigate these hopes, accepting their stone and their scrolls while fiercely protecting the college's core principle, that it must belong to everyone. To refuse any gift was an insult, but to accept it with strings attached would strangle their purpose before the first foundation was laid. She made it clear the college would be a neutral ground, a place for all peoples. The compromise was a new model for its survival. Students would not pay in gold, but in service and song. A dwarven student might help quarry stone for a new library wing, while an elf would tend the gardens that provided food and medicinal herbs. A human minstrel could teach reading to the children of local villages, and a hobbit's knack for comfort would be vital in the kitchens and common rooms. This economy of shared labor and creativity ensured that no one was turned away for lack of coin, and it wove the college directly into the fabric of the surrounding lands. The stakes of this experiment were felt every day. If they succeeded, they would create a new generation of guardians, bards who understood their power as a thread in a larger tapestry. But if they failed, if the college fractured into squabbling factions or fell into isolation, it would prove the fears of elders like Anya correct, that this magic was too dangerous to be shared. The same intellectual pride and cultural division that had allowed the silence to fester could easily take root here. On the morning the first official classes began, a strange quiet settled over the valley. The air itself seemed to still, and then a figure emerged from the tree line, not with the swift grace of an elf or the sturdy gait of a dwarf, but with the slow, deliberate motion of ancient stone and rooted wood. It was an ent, and his voice, when he spoke, was a deep rustle of countless leaves. "The forest has heard your new song," he said. "The shepherd of the trees wishes to speak with the keeper of the lost Chord." The forest of Fangorn was a cathedral of ancient green light. Elara walked beneath its boughs with a reverence usually reserved for temples. the air thick with the scent of damp earth, and a silence that felt deeply thoughtful. The ant who had summoned her, a being named Beachbone, whose voice was the creak of old wood and the rustle of leaves, explained the trouble not with haste, but with a sorrow as deep as roots. The forest's oldest songs, the melodies that guided the growth of saplings and the turning of the seasons, were fading. They were being forgotten, not through malice, but through neglect. The slow, deliberate rhythm of the ant's care could no longer keep pace with the creeping blight of deforestation at the forest's edges. The great trees were losing their will to sing, and without that music, the very lifeblood of the woods was thinning. Elara's first instinct was to play a grand spell of instant renewal, to flood the forest with the vibrant power she now commanded. But she quickly saw that such an approach would be like shouting in a library. The ant's magic was not about force, it was about patient persuasion. So she sat with Beachbone and the other shepherds of the trees, not as a savior, but as a student. She listened for days to their slow, rumbling chants, melodies that unfolded over hours, each note a season in a tree's life. She learned to weave her own simpler, more human-scale growth spells into their vast, timeless chorus. The result was not an explosion of life, but a gentle, pervasive greening. Where bark had been gray and brittle, it softened. Sunlight found its way to the forest floor where it was needed most, and a subtle, vibrant hum returned to the air, a sound of health returning to a vast, living body. This collaboration forged a bond deeper than any alliance. In gratitude, the ants shared their most secret knowledge, dendrochronological melodies. These were not songs to be sung, but to be listened for, the music recorded in the rings of ancient trees. By placing her ear against a trunk and humming a specific pitch, Elara could hear the tree's history, the wet years and the dry, the years of peace and the scars of ancient fire. It was a living archive, a library written in wood and time. Yet this profound success created a new tension. The ant's pace was measured in centuries, while the villages and farms bordering the forest suffered from failing crops and poisoned streams now. How could she ask them to wait for a healing that might take 100 years? Elara found herself mediating between two different experiences of time itself. She could not force the ants to hurry, nor could she abandon the immediate needs of other communities. Her solution was one of integration. She established a rotating schedule, making assistance to the ants a mandatory part of the college curriculum. Every bard in training would spend time in Fangorn, learning the slow songs of growth and the patient art of listening. This did not just teach them spells, it taught them stewardship, weaving the principle of environmental care into the very heart of their education. The stakes of this balance were terrifyingly high. Fangorn was not an isolated grove, it was a lung for the continent. Its decline would trigger a cascade of decay, its magical silence spreading like a blight, weakening the very foundational harmonies she had worked so hard to restore. Success here meant preserving a cornerstone of the world's stability. Standing amidst the quietly rejuvenating woods, Elara was struck by the sheer weight of living memory held within the trees. If a single oak could hold 1,000 years of song in its rings, how many melodies had been lost to war, to forgetting, to simple neglect? The ant's long memory was a gift, but it was also a warning. Inspired, she knew her next great task. She would need to compile a comprehensive archive, a great library, not of scrolls alone, but of living sound, to ensure that no song would ever be so completely lost again. The Great Archive began not as a library, but as a chorus of shared purpose. Elara's vision was simple: to gather every fragment of Bardic lore, every village lullaby with a hint of magic, every battle hymn and growth charm into one protected sanctuary. Under her direction, the college became a hive of meticulous activity. Scribes worked alongside elven lore masters, transcribing sheet music onto vellum that resisted decay. But writing could not capture the soul of the magic, the specific timbre of voice, or the intent behind a note. For this, they used enchanted song stones, smooth crystals that, when held and sung into, could capture and replay the melody perfectly, preserving the original performer's essence. This living repository soon revealed an unexpected property. When a student studying a protective ward would read the notation aloud with clear intent, the spell would flicker to life around them, a harmless, shimmering practice shield. The archive itself became the ultimate teacher, allowing novices to learn from the long-vanished masters directly. Yet this incredible resource also unearthed a grave responsibility. Deep within a collection of scrolls recovered from a ruined fortress, they found spells of compulsion, melodies that could twist a listener's will, and sonic vibrations designed to shatter stone and spirit alike. These were not tools of harmony, but weapons of domination from a darker age. The debate among the college's masters was fierce and fearful. Some argued for destruction, to burn these dangerous melodies and erase the knowledge forever. But Elara, remembering the cost of forgotten history and the seductive power of forbidden secrets, stood firm. She believed that hiding a danger did not defeat it. It only made the world more vulnerable to its rediscovery. Her decision was to preserve everything, but to implement a system of strict access controls. The most perilous spells were locked away in a sealed vault, available only to the most trusted senior lore masters for scholarly study, their dangers plainly documented in bright red ink beside the notation. This policy of radical preservation, however, made the archive a beacon for a different kind of attention. It was no longer just a school, but a fortress of knowledge, and its vaults held power that could corrupt kingdoms. Security had to be woven into the very stones of the building, with harmonic locks that responded only to specific, pure melodies sung by authorized guardians. The ethical vigilance required was a constant, exhausting burden, a reminder that the greatest threats often come not from outside monsters, but from the temptations within. On the day of the archive's formal inauguration, as the halls filled with the harmonious voices of students from every race, a quiet moment of personal discovery unfolded. Kalin approached Elara not with a ceremonial gift, but with a simple, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with a familiar, elegant script. This was Lurel's personal diary, he explained, recovered from a long-lost chest. It spoke not of grand spells or epic battles, but of her doubts, her fears of inadequacy, and her profound love for the sister she would ultimately lose. As Elara turned the fragile pages, the legendary bard was no longer a mythic figure, but a real woman, and her ancestral legacy felt more intimate and human than ever before. The journal's pages felt like whispers from a ghost. For days, Elara pored over Lurel's elegant script, finding not a legendary hero, but a woman grappling with the same fears that haunted her own heart. Lurel wrote of the intoxicating pull of the battle magics, the seductive ease of forcing her will upon the world, and the constant fear that her love for her sister Morwen was a fatal weakness. Then she found the crucial entry, a passage where Lurel confessed to a desperate act. To protect a secret too great to risk, she had used a dangerous spell to intentionally fragment her own memory, scattering the knowledge across her own mind to keep it from the enemy. The secret was the location of the Heartstone, a legendary gem said to resonate with the pure essence of the Foundation Chord, capable of amplifying a bard's magic to unimaginable levels. Reading this was like finding a missing piece of her own soul, the self-doubt she had carried, the guilt over her own moments of temptation. All of it was mirrored in her ancestors' private struggle. It was a profound emotional closure, a validation that her own path of restraint and ethics was not a sign of weakness, but the harder, wiser choice Lurel herself had championed. Yet this understanding also brought a crushing weight. How could she possibly live up to a legacy built on such immense personal sacrifice? The Heartstone represented a chance to ensure their safety, a tool of such power that no threat could ever challenge the college's harmony again. The temptation to drop everything and begin the search was a physical ache, but she thought of the students in the courtyard, their voices raised in a simple, unified spell of cleansing. She remembered the fragile alliances she had built and the trust she had earned. To abandon that now, to chase a relic of pure power, would betray every lesson Lurel's journal had just taught her. Power, unchecked by community and responsibility, was the very path that had led to the silence. Her decision was firm. She would not seek the Heartstone. The college and its students were her priority, a living legacy more important than any artifact. This choice cemented her commitment, but it was not made without fear. The stone's power could be a game changer in a future crisis, a means to heal entire blighted lands or shield a city from annihilation. Yet its discovery would also be a beacon, attracting not just the desperate, but the ambitious and the greedy, potentially shattering the fragile peace she had worked so hard to build. This careful balance was tested far sooner than she expected. A few weeks later, a former student, a young man named Reese, returned to the college from a journey south. His face was pale, his usual cheerful demeanor gone. He brought troubling news of melodies that twisted in the air over the plains of Rohan, songs that did not corrupt the land, but instead seemed to stir a deep, restless anger in the hearts of men. The air in the archive felt suddenly thin. Finn stood before Elara, but the vibrant young bard she had taught was gone, replaced by a gaunt figure whose eyes held a haunted shadow. His words tumbled out in a frantic, discordant rhythm as he described the cult of the shattered Chord. They were not mere bandits or rogue mages, he explained, but true believers. They saw the original binding of the silence as a crime against artistic freedom, a suppression of music's raw, chaotic potential. Their goal was not to unleash the old hunger, but to create a new one, a perfected silence born from the deliberate perversion of every spell they could twist. They worshipped dissonance itself. Elara listened, a cold dread seeping into her bones. This was not the residual corruption she had healed in the Shire. This was a conscious, intelligent movement, a cancer growing from within the very community she sought to protect. Her dream of safety through education now seemed dangerously naive. How do you teach harmony to those who have made a religion of noise? Her gaze lingered on Finn. She remembered his brilliant, untamed talent, and the small fire that had gotten out of control in the practice hall, the minor tremor he had accidentally caused while showing off. His impulsiveness was a well-documented risk, yet the raw terror in his voice was not a performance. He had seen their rituals, he said, where spells of growth were inverted to blight the land, and lullabies were twisted into screams. He had barely escaped with his sanity intact. Trust was a fragile instrument, easily broken. To distrust him now might push him back into their clutches, or blind her to a real threat. To trust him completely could be a catastrophic error in judgment. The decision was a delicate chord she had to strike. She would give him a chance, but not a free one. "Finn," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you understand these people. You know how they think. I need you to lead a small, swift team back to the fringes of their territory. Observe their numbers, their movements, their resources. Gather intelligence, but do not, under any circumstances, engage. This is a mission of redemption, not reckoning. You will be supervised, and you will report everything." The relief on his face was palpable, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. As he gathered his small team and slipped away from the college under the cover of twilight, Elara felt the peaceful rhythm of their sanctuary shatter. The cult of the shattered chord was not just an external threat. It was a perversion of their core philosophy, a direct challenge to every melody of unity they had woven. If left unchecked, their corrupted songs could unravel the foundational harmonies she had sacrificed so much to restore, undoing years of progress in a few months of sonic terrorism. With Finn's departure, the college shifted from a school to a garrison. Elara began drilling the students in defensive harmonies, teaching them to recognize and counter sonic attacks. She supervised the strengthening of their harmonic locks and sent messengers to their allies, warning of this new, insidious danger. An ounce of prevention, she knew, was worth a symphony of cure, but she could not shake the feeling that a terrible song was already being written, and they were desperately scrambling to learn the counter melody before the first note fell. The deserted fortress was a scar on the plains, its broken towers silhouetted against a bruised sky. Finn and his small team watched from a ridge, their stomachs twisting as the cult's twisted melodies drifted up on the wind. Below, the leaders stood in a circle, their voices a grating cacophony that did not ask, but commanded. The very earth groaned in response. A herd of deer, their eyes wide with a terror not their own, stampeded mindlessly toward a cliff edge. Simultaneously, a deep, percussive beat vibrated through the ground, a manufactured tremor aimed at a nearby village whose lights twinkled innocently in the valley. Finn knew he had a choice: follow Elara's orders to observe or act. The sight of that forced panic, that perversion of nature's song, was too much. He began to sing, not a loud battle cry, but a quiet, insistent counter-song, a melody of calm and free will meant to untangle the cult's dissonant threads. For a moment, it worked. The deer faltered, shaking their heads in confusion. The ground's tremble softened into a harmless rumble, but the fragile harmony shattered the cult's concentration. A dozen hooded heads snapped toward their hiding place. Their retreat was a frantic scramble, arrows of solidified discord whipping past their ears as they fled into the gathering darkness. Back at the college, the news was met not with praise, but with fraught silence. The village was saved, but the fragile veil of secrecy was torn. Anya, the elder minstrel, was the first to voice the fear gripping many. "You have poked a hornet's nest," she argued, her voice tight. "They were a fringe madness. Now you have made them martyrs and given them a named enemy. This confrontation will only escalate their reach and their rage." Diplomatic messengers from allied regions expressed deep concern, fearing their own lands would become battlegrounds in a war of sound they did not understand. The unity Elara had painstakingly built was trembling under the weight of this new, aggressive reality. Elara listened to every fearful argument, her own heart heavy with the risk Finn had taken. Yet she saw his action for what it was, not recklessness, but a refusal to stand by while harm was done. "We cannot hide from this," she finally responded, her voice calm but resolute. "To do nothing is to grant them the very silence they crave to fill, but neither will we become them. Our answer must be both shield and song." She advocated for a dual path, strengthening their defenses and preparing counterspells, while simultaneously sending envoys to any who would listen, exposing the cult's true nature as destroyers, not liberators. She would not resort to their aggression, but she would not sheathe her voice in the face of theirs. The stakes were now terrifyingly personal. The cult's ability to mimic the outer forms of bardic magic meant any traveling minstrel could be viewed with suspicion. They could infiltrate the college itself, or worse, turn public opinion against all bards, painting them as the source of the chaos they fought to prevent. The very art of harmony risked being condemned as a weapon. In response to this looming shadow, Elara conceived a bold and public answer. She would not wait for the cult's next move. She would remind the world of the beauty they sought to defend. She organized a grand festival of harmony, inviting every community, from the humblest hobbit village to the dwarf lords in their halls, to witness the true power of bardic magic, a power that healed the land, celebrated life, and wove communities together. It was to be a living testament, a chorus of light meant to drown out the whispers of dissonance before they could take root in fearful hearts. Music filled the valley, a living tapestry woven from dwarven drum and elven flute, from hobbit fiddle and the clear voices of human choirs. Elara's Festival of Harmony was not a mere concert, but a living demonstration. On the main stage, a group of student bards sang a complex growth spell, their voices coaxing a blighted patch of earth to sprout vibrant wildflowers before the crowd's astonished eyes. In another corner, a gentle lullaby woven with threads of light visibly soothed a skittish horse, while a unified chant from visiting dwarven miners strengthened a cracked stone bridge. The air itself shimmered with goodwill, and for 3 days, the college grounds were a beacon of shared purpose, mending the frayed trust the cult's whispers had created. New applicants lined up at the enrollment tables, their eyes bright with a desire to learn this magic of connection, not corruption. Yet Elara moved through the celebrations with a quiet, watchful tension. She knew such a powerful gathering of positive energy would be an irresistible lure. Her security was not in armed guards, but in the music itself. She had worked with every performing group, weaving subtle counter-harmonies and protective wards into the very fabric of their songs. A joyous dance tune contained an undercurrent that would gently repel malicious intent, and a soaring ballad created an invisible dome over the crowd, a shield that felt like warm sunlight. It was a delicate balance, protecting the people without poisoning the atmosphere with overt suspicion. She spotted them occasionally, faces in the crowd that did not smile with their eyes, listeners who flinched at the most potent harmonies. The cult's leaders were here, disguised as simple travelers, assessing the strength of the world they sought to shatter. The festival's final chord faded into a roaring, heartfelt applause that seemed to shake the very mountains. It was a resounding success, a clear victory for unity that would undoubtedly stem the cult's recruitment and isolate their violent message. But the true cost of that victory became clear mere hours after the last guest departed. A breathless messenger, a student from the intelligence network Elara had cultivated, delivered a stark report. The cult had not been deterred, they had been provoked. Their leaders, having witnessed the full scope of the college's power, were now mobilizing for a decisive, symbolic strike. Their target was the stone circle on the Isle of Balar, the very site where Elara had sealed the silence, a place sacred to the new age of Bardic magic. They meant to desecrate the past to destroy the future. The salt-stung winds of the Isle of Balar felt like a memory made real. Elara stood once more within the ancient stone circle, but this time she was not alone. A contingent of her most advanced students and trusted allies moved with quiet purpose around her, their hands and voices weaving layers of protective enchantments into the very air. The monoliths themselves began to hum, charged with a network of harmonic shields and wards designed to repel dissonance. This was no longer a solitary vigil. It was a preparation for war, and the stone circle had become a stark, open-air classroom for crisis management. Elara watched her students practice a complex counter-song, their voices braiding together to form a shimmering, resonant barrier. Her pride in their skill was a sharp, painful knot in her chest, tangled with a deep and persistent dread. Was she right to bring them here, to the very edge of a conflict that could shatter their spirits as easily as their bodies? These were healers and historians, not soldiers. The ethical weight of placing them in harm's way felt heavier than any stone on the island. She made her decision clear to everyone. Only volunteers who had completed the most rigorous ethics training would stand in the circle that night. Our purpose is not to destroy the cult, she reminded them, her voice carrying over the sea breeze. Our purpose is to protect this place. Your every spell must be one of containment, of shielding, of de-escalation. We answer their violence with an unbreakable harmony. This principle became their drills, as they learned to transform aggressive sonic attacks into harmless ripples of energy, and to weave nets of calming melody to subdue without causing harm. Yet everyone understood the terrifying stakes. The stone circle was not merely a historical site. It was a vital linchpin in the world's magical network, a nexus where the foundation chord had been restored. If the cult of the shattered chord succeeded in corrupting this sacred ground, the damage would ripple across the continents, weakening every enchantment of growth and protection, and potentially creating a wound in reality as grave as the original silence. The fate of their entire restorative age balanced on the edge of a single, coming night, as the silver coin of the full moon began its slow ascent. A sentry's cry echoed from the cliff. On the dark horizon, a fleet of black-sailed ships slid into view, their prows cutting through the water like a blade through a final, fragile cord. The black ships did not sail so much as crawl across the water, their hulls emitting a low, grinding drone that felt like a physical pressure against the skin. As they neared the shore, The sound intensified into a focused wave of pure dissonance, a wall of anti-music that slammed into the stone circle. The harmonic shields Elara's students had woven flared with brilliant light, but the air itself crackled with the strain, the beautiful protective melodies fraying at the edges under the relentless sonic assault. Elara stood at the circle's heart, her voice a steady anchor in the storm, directing the chorus. Raise the third harmony, now the descant, hold it. Their unified song swelled, a barrier of interwoven light and sound that pushed back against the corrosive noise. Yet she knew a perfect defense would not be enough. They were being worn down. Finn, she called out, her command cutting through the din. His team knew the plan. While the main chorus held the line, his small group would slip into the water, using the chaos as cover to sabotage the acoustic weapons at their source. The strange, pulsating crystals mounted on the prows of the cult's ships. It was a desperate gamble, but the only way to break the siege. For a tense hour, the battle was a stalemate of sound, a brutal contest between creation and oblivion. Then, a sharp, discordant shriek echoed from the lead ship, followed by an unnatural silence. One of the prow crystals had gone dark. A ragged cheer went up from the defenders, but it died in their throats as they saw a new commotion on the enemy deck. Finn's team was scrambling back over the side, one member short. Finn himself had been cornered and overwhelmed, dragged into the ship's dark hold. The choice that followed was an agony that tore at the very core of Elara's leadership. The barrier was holding, but barely. To divert any of her limited forces to a rescue attempt could collapse their entire defense, sacrificing the stone circle and everyone in it. Yet to abandon, Finn was to surrender a piece of their collective soul to the very dissonance they fought, to prove the cult right about the coldness of their harmony. Her compassion warred with her duty, and in that terrible moment, she knew she could not uphold one by abandoning the other. We are not them, she stated, her voice ringing with a new, fierce certainty. Our strength is in our bonds, not just our barriers. She turned to her most senior student, a steady-eyed elf named Lyre. The circle is yours. Hold the harmony. Do not let it falter. Then, to a handful of her most agile and quick-witted defenders, she gave a single, sharp nod. With me, the fate of the world's magic now hinged on a split strategy, a terrifying gamble that risked everything on both fronts. If the student's concentration broke, the circle would fall. If her rescue team failed, she would lose a brave soul and shatter the trust of every follower. Her moral authority, the very belief that their way was different, was on the line. As her small team melted into the shadows along the shoreline, the main chorus redoubled its efforts, their song rising in both volume and complexity to cover the absence. Elara used their performance as a cloak, weaving a specific, diversionary melody into the air, a haunting, complex phrase that mimicked the sound of a structural weakness in their harmonic shield. As the cult's forces predictably redirected their assault toward this perceived opening, she and her team slipped through the resulting gap in their attention, moving like ghosts across the dark water toward the cult's flagship, where a friend was imprisoned and a leader awaited. The air inside the flagship's hold was thick with the scent of ozone and despair. Elara found Finn chained to the central mast, his head bowed, his fingers bleeding as they were forced to pluck discordant notes from a corrupted lyre. The cult's leader, a gaunt man named Thuron, stood over him, his own instrument a twisted construction of jagged metal and frayed strings. He did not look like a fanatic, but like a scholar worn thin by bitterness. "You see," he said, his voice a low rasp that grated against the ears. "He uses his gift to bind and control. We use ours to set music free, to let it be wild and true in its chaos." Elara met his gaze, her own lyre held ready. "You call this freedom? This is just another cage, one built from pain." Their duel began not with a clash, but with a divergence. Thuron's fingers flew across his strings, unleashing a screaming frequency meant to shatter will and reason. It was a song of pure negation, a wall of sound that sought to erase everything in its path. Elara did not meet it with a wall of her own. Instead, she wove a melody of empathy, a gentle, probing harmony that slipped between the cracks of his rage. Her song did not fight his pain, it sought to understand it. It painted pictures of quiet libraries and the joy of a first mastered chord, of a love for music that was once pure. The defensive shields of her students outside faltered for a crucial moment as her focus turned inward, the risk of her choice becoming terrifyingly real. Thuron's assault wavered. A memory, long buried, broke through his fury. He saw not an enemy before him, but the ghost of his own younger self, a man who had believed music could heal. His wife, a singer, had been lost to a magical plague that no healing spell could touch. His grief had curdled, twisting his scholarship into the belief that if music could not save a life, it did not deserve to be gentle. "My failure does not justify yours," Elara sang, her voice steady despite the strain. "You loved the song once. Let me help you remember how." In that suspended moment, Thuron stood at a precipice. His anger was a familiar shield, his hatred a comfortable weight. To surrender it felt like a betrayal of his own loss, yet the melody she offered was a key to a door he had sealed shut, a chance to feel something other than the cold void of his rage. His choice would echo far beyond this ship. If he rejected her, his cult would see it as a sign of her weakness, fracturing into even more violent and unpredictable cells. If he accepted, there was a path, however difficult, toward dismantling the hatred from within. Elara made her final decision. She would not sing a spell of binding or sleep. She poured the last of her energy into a restorative harmony, a lullaby of remembrance woven with the pure light of Rivendell. She sang directly to the wounded scholar inside the furious leader, restoring the vivid, positive memory of his wife's laughter, the very sound he had tried to destroy. Thuron's jagged note shattered midair. A single, clear tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. His hands fell from his instrument, the weapon clattering to the deck. "It is enough," he whispered, the words a surrender not to her, but to the memory he could no longer fight. He turned to his stunned followers and gave the order to stand down. The battle of frequencies ceased, replaced by a bewildered and fragile quiet. The process of reconciliation would be long and fraught with mistrust, but the first, most difficult chord had been struck. As the cultists laid down their weapons under the wary eyes of Elara's students, a new and different challenge began to take shape, one of accountability and the slow, careful work of mending broken spirits. The dismantling of the cult was a quiet symphony of patience. Elara oversaw the careful process of peaceful disbandment, offering each member a choice: rehabilitation within the college or exile, with the condition of forswearing their corrupted arts. Many, their eyes hollow from the dissonance they had channeled, chose to stay. They entered a new program of bardic therapy, where melodies of remembrance and empathy were used not as weapons, but as gentle tools to excavate the grief and anger that had twisted their love for music. It was slow, delicate work, mending spirits that had been taught to glorify their own brokenness. The most remarkable transformation was Thuron himself. He did not become a hero, but a sober lecturer, his gaunt frame a living testament as he stood before students and detailed the seductive, step-by-step path from scholarly passion to magical extremism. His stark honesty turned him into one of their most powerful advocates for harmony. Yet this integration was not a seamless chorus. A palpable tension hummed within the college halls. Longtime members like Anya watched the former cultists with open distrust, their whispers a counterpoint to the official message of forgiveness. How can we break bread with those who sought to shatter our very foundation? Anya argued, her voice tight with a fear shared by many. Elara knew that forcing coexistence would only breed resentment. Her solution was a structured mentorship program. Each former cultist was paired with a trusted, senior student, creating a bond of shared responsibility. The mentors provided guidance and accountability, while also witnessing firsthand the genuine struggle and remorse of their charges. It was a system designed to foster understanding from both sides, transforming abstract fear into a human relationship. The stakes of this experiment stretched far beyond their valley. The college's radical approach to rehabilitation was being watched by allied kingdoms and rival factions alike. If they succeeded, it could establish a new precedent for resolving magical conflicts, one based on healing and redemption rather than punitive banishment or execution. It was a chance to prove that the true strength of their harmony lay in its capacity to mend, not just to defend, but failure would be catastrophic, validating every skeptical voice and potentially creating a fifth column of resentment within their own walls. The fragile unity Elara had sacrificed so much to build was now being tested from the inside, with the immediate, violent threat dissolved into this more complex, internal challenge. Elara allowed her focus to expand. The college was stable, its new programs running under the careful guidance of her senior staff. A different kind of melody began to call to her, one of discovery rather than defense. She turned her attention to the vast, uncharted regions on the edges of their maps, places where ancient civilizations had risen and fallen without a single written record. Whispers from traders and the fragmented lore in the Great Archive spoke of lost songs waiting in silent ruins and secluded valleys, melodies that could hold forgotten spells or complete historical gaps in their understanding. The work of preservation was never truly finished. An expedition began to take shape in her mind, a journey to ensure that no song, no matter how distant or faint, would ever be completely lost to the silence of time again. The eastern sky over Rune was a vast, empty bowl of burning blue. Elara's expedition pushed into the deep desert, a place where the very concept of sound seemed to die under the sun's glare. They were following a local legend, whispered to them by a nomadic elder in exchange for a song that brought rain to a parched oasis. The elder spoke of star songs, melodies that fell to earth with the evening light, audible only in certain silica-rich dunes that acted as a natural amplifier for celestial music. To find these echoes of the heavens, the team employed a new form of magic, acoustic mapping. They would sing a single, pure note, then listen intently as the sound waves returned, altered and shaped by the hidden geography of the sand, revealing the location of the resonant dunes like a diviner finding water. It was a slow, painstaking process in an environment that offered no forgiveness for error. The relentless heat warped the air, and unfamiliar customs created invisible barriers. Some tribes watched their progress from a distance, their silence a wall of suspicion against these Westerners who came to collect the desert's most sacred sounds. Elara understood that their tools in their quest could easily be mistaken for theft, so she made a pivotal decision. She ordered the team to pack away their mapping instruments each evening and instead sit with the local communities, not as scholars, but as guests. They shared their own songs of forest and mountain, and in return, the people of Rune taught them the rhythms of the wind over the dunes and the stories written in the constellations. This was not an extraction, but an exchange, a building of respectful relationships, note by note. This patience and cultural humility bore incredible fruit. When they finally located the first singing dune and lay upon its cool surface at dusk, the music that rose from the earth was not anything they could have imagined. The star songs were complex, ethereal harmonies that seemed to vibrate directly in the soul. As Elara's most gifted scribes worked with enchanted songstones to capture the melodies, they realized these were not mere tunes. Woven into the harmonies were intricate healing spells that mended the spirit as well as the body, addressing sorrow and trauma with the same precision a poultice might treat a wound. Even more profound were the subtle prophecies hidden within the cadence, not clear visions of the future, but patterns of possibility, hints of cosmic cycles, and the slow turning of ages. These discoveries expanded the very definition of bardic magic, offering a new, celestial dimension to their understanding of Middle-earth's cosmology. The stakes of this cultural bridge were immense. Success meant forging the first true international alliances with the vast and mysterious East, creating a magically unified community that spanned the continent. It promised a future where knowledge flowed in all directions, strengthening everyone, but a single misstep, a perceived act of disrespect or cultural arrogance, could shatter this fragile trust, turning potential allies into wary adversaries and proving that old prejudices ran deeper than any new song. When the expedition finally turned for home, their packs were heavy with recorded star songs, and their hearts were light with new understanding. More valuable than any spell, however, were the rolled parchments they carried, carefully inscribed with invitations. They were invitations for masters of the Eastern arts to journey west, to teach and to learn at the College of Harmonies. The horizon of their world had just grown much wider, and the next great chorus was preparing to begin. The great amphitheater hummed with a potential unlike anything Elara had ever felt. Inspired by the profound exchange in Rune, her vision for a unity chorus was no mere festival, but a deliberate act of magical weaving. Bards arrived from every corner of Middle-earth, their instruments as varied as their languages, from the deep-throated horns of the dwarves to the delicate wind chimes of the wood elves and the complex, rhythmic drums of the eastern tribes. Her goal was audacious, to blend these distinct traditions into a single, world-strengthening harmony, a chord that would resonate through the very bones of the earth. The initial rehearsals were a lesson in controlled chaos. A dwarven battle chant clashed violently with an elven lament, the conflicting frequencies causing the air to shimmer with visible distress. Anya and her traditionalists argued for a structure based on established Western scales, while the Eastern masters insisted on the complex modal systems of their star songs. Elara's diplomatic skill was tested at every turn, mediating artistic clashes that felt deeply personal to each culture. Her solution was as radical as the chorus itself. She refused to impose a single musical language. Instead, she designed the performance as a collaborative composition, a living tapestry where each tradition would contribute an essential thread. She arranged the musicians in a great spiral, not a hierarchy, ensuring no single voice could dominate the whole. They worked for days, not on a fixed song, but on a system of call and response, learning to listen, to adapt, to find the spaces where their unique sounds could interlock without losing their identity. The stakes of this cooperation stretched far beyond the amphitheater. If they succeeded, they would create a sustained resonance capable of healing the land itself, sealing the residual cracks left by the silence and past wars. It could establish a living network, a way for a warning or a call for aid to be sung across vast distances in an instant. But if they failed, if the performance dissolved into a cacophony of competing pride, it would prove every skeptic right, reinforcing ancient prejudices and pushing the peoples of Middle-earth back into their isolated corners. When the day finally arrived, the first note was not a command, but an invitation. One by one, each cultural group added their voice, not playing over one another, but weaving around and through the growing melody. The dwarven rhythm became the steadfast heartbeat, the elven harmonies the soaring spirit, the Eastern melodies the intricate, knowing soul. Their combined music manifested as a visible wave of golden light that pulsed outwards from the valley, washing over the land. In its wake, blighted fields greened, poisoned streams ran clear, and a profound, deep-seated peace settled over the hearts of all who heard it. The final note did not end so much as it settled, a warm, low hum that seemed to sink into the soil and stone, a permanent guardian harmony woven into the world. Elara felt a fulfillment so profound, it was almost a sorrow, a quiet joy, that her long journey had led to this moment of unified creation. Yet, as the last echo faded against the mountains, she looked out at the smiling, weary faces of her chorus, and knew with absolute certainty that a guardian's work is never truly done. A new song was always waiting to be found, a new silence always begging to be filled. The weight of the silver lyre felt familiar in her hands, yet the burden of daily leadership no longer rested on her shoulders. In a quiet ceremony under the Malorn trees, Elara passed the formal title of Master to Finn. Her choice was met with wide approval, for he had grown from a reckless student into a wise and compassionate leader, his understanding of magic deepened by his own hard-won redemption. She did not retire to a life of quiet solitude, however. Instead, she turned her focus inward, to the immense and delicate task of capturing a lifetime of lessons in ink and parchment. Her days were now spent in the sunlit scriptorium of the college, painstakingly writing the text that would become known as the Codex of the Silver Chord. This was not a simple spellbook, but a profound exploration of bardic ethics. She filled its pages with the dangers of pride, the importance of listening to the land, and the delicate balance between power and compassion, using stories from her own journey as both warning and inspiration. Letting go was a constant, quiet struggle. She would watch Finn navigate a dispute with a visiting diplomat, or revise the curriculum for a new class, and a familiar anxiety would clench in her chest. The instinct to step in, to guide his hand with her experience, was a powerful pull. She worried that a challenge she had never faced would emerge, a threat for which her hard-won wisdom offered no map. The true test of her legacy, she knew, would come in the moments she was not there to intervene. Her decision was a conscious act of trust. She made herself available as an advisor and an occasional lecturer, a living resource rather than a commanding voice. She learned to offer her perspective only when asked, to support without controlling. This was perhaps her final and most difficult lesson, that true stewardship means preparing the ground for others to grow, even if their path diverges from the one you would have chosen. The stakes of this transition could not be higher. The Codex was quickly copied and distributed, becoming the foundational text for bards across the continent. Her story, now taught alongside the ancient legends, inspired a new generation to see their magic as a sacred trust. Yet she knew that words on a page could be misinterpreted, and principles could be slowly eroded by convenience or fear. The future of Harmony itself now depended on how well these future guardians internalized her teachings, on whether they would choose the harder path of wisdom when the easier path of power beckoned. One autumn morning, with the Codex complete and the college thriving under Finn's confident direction, Elara felt a quiet summons. She packed a simple bag, took up her lyre, and embarked on a final, personal journey. She walked the familiar paths without urgency, visiting the silent ruins where her magic first awoke, the sheltered cave where she and Kalin had planned their next move, and the windswept stone circle on the Isle of Balar. In each place, she did not play grand spells, but simple melodies of remembrance. She was not seeking to change the world, but to listen to the echoes of her own story within it, to understand how a single, forgotten song could ripple outward to become the chorus of an age. The stone circle felt both ancient and intimately familiar beneath her feet. Elara stood in the center of the Isle of Balar, the same salt-laced wind tugging at her hair, but her heart held a quiet stillness that had not been there before. She lifted her silver lyre, not to cast a spell or heal a wound, but to offer a simple melody of gratitude. The notes were soft, a personal thanks for the journey, for the friendships, and for the peace she had helped to nurture. As her song drifted through the monoliths, the air began to shimmer. From the stones themselves, light coalesced, forming three-dimensional echoes of her past. There was Kalin, offering his hand under the twilight trees, Borin and his dwarves, raising a mug in a firelit cave, the faces of her students, their voices raised in the first successful harmony at the new college. Each memory was a perfect, luminous hologram, a gallery of her life's work, playing out around her in a silent, beautiful dance. Pride swelled within her, a deep and genuine warmth, but it was inextricably woven with a thread of profound sorrow. She saw the ghost of her own mother's face, a memory she had willingly given to the spell that saved the world, now forever just beyond her reach. This was the bittersweet truth of any great ending, the understanding that every gain is shadowed by a loss. The celebration of all she had built could could not erase the cost of building it. In that moment of peaceful conflict, her decision felt inevitable, the final, necessary note in her personal song. She gently laid the silver lyre down upon the central altar stone. It was an offering, a release. Her story as its bearer was complete. By leaving it here, in this sacred nexus of power, she ensured its magic would remain safe, a resource for a future guardian in a future crisis, while removing it from the temptations of ordinary life. It was her last act of stewardship. As she turned and walked away, her hands feeling strangely light and free, she glanced up at the darkening sky. A new star gleamed into existence, a steady, silver point of light where none had been before. A soft whisper seemed to ride the wind, a name from a forgotten tale, Lurel. It was a sign that an ending in one world is merely a new verse in a greater, cosmic chorus, and that no song of true meaning is ever truly silent.